Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Transportation and Environment Committee work session. Today, we'll review and discuss amendments to the Comprehensive Water Supply and Sewerage Systems Plan. The county's Department of Environmental Protection is responsible for assembling, reviewing, and processing category change amendments. DEP coordinates with staff from the Planning Department, WSSC Water, and the Department of Permitting Services, and includes comments from those departments and agencies in its executive staff report. Amendments that are determined by DEP to be consistent with specific water and sewer plan policies can be approved by the DEP director through DEP's administrative delegation process. However, DEP doesn't administratively deny requests, so all requests which are not recommended for approval by DEP go through the council review process. Council staff, Mr. Levchenko, have included in the packet a detailed explanation of each of the 6 requests that have been reviewed by the council. Before I pass it to Mr. Levchenko, do either of my colleagues have anything to add? Okay. Mr. Levchenko, thanks again for your very thorough packet. Let me turn it over to you.
Sure, and I did want to mention we have Alan Sukup and Steve Shofar from the Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you.
And also Catherine Nelson from the Planning Department.
Great.
So they can certainly speak to their respective departments / agencies' positions. And just wanted to dovetail on one thing you were saying about the administrative delegation process, Mr. Hucker. What that means is that the requests that do come to the council tend to have some issue with them. So it's not like every category change request is controversial. It's just that the ones that the council sees tend to have more issues than the ones that can be easily approved by DEP because there are no issues. They are pretty straightforward. We don't generally see those other than in copies. So just wanted to lay that framework. And in fact, all the requests today are in areas outside the established planned envelopes. So we are dealing with special policies that may or may not allow service to those properties. And that's what we focus on today. You briefly mentioned the council review process. We did have a public hearing, and we also got comments from the planning board, or formal comments from the planning board, which are all included in the packet. And we can get into the details of those as needed as we get into each of the items. The other thing I did want to mention is that while we have these category change processes typically once or twice a year, the council also does a comprehensive update to the 10-year water and sewer plan. We most recently did one it started about 3 years ago. And in fact, we have another update that DEP has indicated should be coming to the council later this calendar year. So it's another opportunity for the council to weigh in on these policies directly, apart from any specific cases they may be dealing with. So that's important to know. And then, of course, the master plan process is really the sort of overarching process here where other policies fall from. So ultimately, in some cases, the water and sewer plan is literally just implementing what the master plan calls for. And so in some cases, changes to that would actually require master plan amendments. And we can certainly get into that detail later if necessary. With that, I'm happy to go into a quick case-by-case review. We only have 6 requests, so I think we can do them in a fairly concise manner today. So I'm just going to do them in order that they appear in the packet. I was going to share my screen so that we can bring up appropriate maps that will help council members see what's going on the property or what is being requested. I think that will help a lot. And so I'm going to share the screen now and bring that up, and then we'll get started. Okay, can you see the screen now that shows the first page of my packet?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So these are the 6 category change requests, and I've noted here what is being requested, the executive recommendation, and then the planning board recommendation. And then I have some notes here about where some of the information is. But we're just going jump right into the first request, which happens to be 20 Pax-01 Michael Smith. And I'm going to jump to a map of that request. All right, so you can see on the screen, I hope, this is actually a 32.9 acre RC zoned property located on Edner Road. You can see Edner Road right here in Cloverly. The property is currently a horse stable and riding school. The applicant is seeking public water service to support a 6-lot residential subdivision. And there is a main that abuts the property that can serve it. The applicant has submitted a preliminary plan to the planning department. The planning department has indicated they have some issues with the preliminary plan and have some concerns about whether it's consistent with the master plan and cluster requirements for this site. And the executive, based on those comments, the executive is recommending deferral of the request to give the planning department staff more time to work with the applicant to get the preliminary plan in order or consistent with the master plan. And I think the planning department obviously concurred with that, and council staff concurs with that approach as well. Are there any questions regarding this specific request?
Makes sense. What do you expect, Tom? If that's okay, I'll just
go ahead, please.
What do you expect as far as timing?
Maybe Ms. Nelson might be able to answer that a little bit better, since she's more familiar with the preliminary plan review process with these types of cases. Catherine, are you there?
Yes, this is Catherine Nelson, representing the Montgomery County Planning Board. What we're looking for is for the applicant to just rearrange this, these new lot lines to be a true cluster to preserve the Patuxent Reservoir, which is just downstream of here. And, you know, as soon as they would submit a preliminary plan that we can all agree on, they can move forward.
And I think typically with deferrals, there's an assumption that it's going to come back to the council within a year, but it could certainly be faster than that. There's no requirement that it be a certain period of time, but the intent is that it's not meant to be an indefinite deferral. The idea is that it would be coming back in a reasonable time frame. Any other questions on that request?
I'm good. None from me.
You'll have to speak up because with the screen sharing, I can't see any nods anymore. I think without objection, Mr. Levchenko, thank you.
Okay. Our next request is 20-TRV-03 Aurora, and I'm going to bring up a map of that one. And this request involves a 3.7 acre RE2 zoned property located on Boswell Lane in Potomac. The applicant is seeking public sewer service to connect to their existing single family home. There is an abutting sewer main right here along Boswell Lane. This sewer was actually extended a number of years ago to serve a subdivision on the other side of the street. In order to access that subdivision, it had to abut this property. Typically, requests like this, as I note in the packet, would go through DEP's administrative delegation process. However, there is a wrinkle in this one, and I'm going to bring up another map to show this. In this case, the applicant is seeking to have the main extended another 140 feet and then access it from that new location with a shorter on-site extension than would be required if it were to be accessed where it is now. However, the complication with that is by extending that, it would actually confront or abut another property across the street, the Kapoor property as shown here, which is actually the subject of the next category change request we'd be getting into. And the abutting mains policy does not have a provision for extension of service. As I note in the packet, the assumption is that you connect, if feasible, from the main where it is. I did ask DEP staff if we had examples of other abutting mains cases where we had extensions involved, and Mr. Suka was not able to find any, and we've had a lot of these requests over the years. And there is concern from the executive and council staff that if you allow for extensions as part of this policy, it would be a significant, or could lead to a significant expansion of the number of properties that would be eligible in the abutting mains policy. So the executive, planning board, and staff, while we recommend approval of the abutting main connection to the Aurora property, the recommendation is that it be connected from the existing main and not involve a main extension, as the applicant had requested. So that's sort of a wrinkle in this policy here. Did council members have questions about this specific issue?
Yeah, I have a quick question. The request by the homeowner, I presume that's just a financial decision, or is there some other engineering or other type of rationale for it?
Well, we certainly WSSC gets involved because they have to indicate that whatever is being requested is feasible. And WSSC has indicated that it is feasible to serve the property from either of these locations, either where the main has ended, or if you extend it further. So there's not an engineering reason that you have to extend it. From the applicant's standpoint, they would have a little shorter on-site extension, but that's, in terms of cost, because they'd be extending the main, and this is noted in the executive staff report, it could actually cost more to extend the main than it would be to have a longer on-site connection. But the real issue here is that the Aurora property had coordinated with the Kapoor property, and we're looking at a way that they could serve both properties. And this is a way that could happen. Because, as I mentioned in the next category change, without this abutting connection to Kapoor, the Kapoor property does not have a water and sewer plan policy that would allow service to it. So I think the Aurora and Kapoor property owners looked at this as sort of a joint action that could work for both properties.
Yeah, understood. Okay, thank you.
And explain again, if you could, the concern that if you were to allow the extension of the main, that it would lead to an expansion of, just go over that again.
Well, certainly if you normally with an abutting main, you have the property in front of the main that connects, and that's it. And there's no chance that any other properties that are otherwise ineligible would then become eligible, because all you have is an on-site connection and extension. If you begin to allow extensions along, main extensions, for instance, here along the right-of-way, in this case, it would abut one more property. It's certainly possible that in other cases there would be other properties that would be in the same situation that would also be allowed to connect because of this extension that would otherwise not be allowed to connect.
So is it normally the case, sorry to interrupt you, but is it normally the case that there's sort of whatever is the most restrictive is the policy? Like here, since you can serve the Aurora property without extending to the Kapoor property, that is what you should do, according to our kind of general existing policy?
Yeah, I think to take a step back, remember these properties are not within the sewer envelope. So we're looking at special,
so that we can have a more thorough public policy conversation, and so that we don't have to decide these in ad hoc fashion.
The one other point I did want to make, cautioning against approval again, is the ultimate authority on the water and sewer plan is the Maryland Department of the Environment. And they look at the consistency with our master plans and with our own planning processes. And so, to the degree they find concerns about us making exceptions to our own policies, it's not unheard of for them to deny amendments that the council has approved. It has happened. So that's another concern, is certainly if we think something is consistent with the intent of the policy, that's one thing. If we just can't find even that, then we do risk certainly having MDE deny the request. So that's another good reason to make sure we have our policy the way we want it, rather than try to shoehorn things into it.
Agreed.
Sounds good.
Okay, so it sounds like for the Aurora property, it sounds like the committee is recommending approval as recommended by the executive planning board and council staff, which is an assumption that it would be the connection would be to the existing main location.
Right.
We could put a note or include a note ultimately in a resolution if this is approved that the policy may be revisited as part of the comprehensive update or something like that to flag that.
That sounds great. Gentlemen, I think we got to pick these up because we spent half an hour on two.
Well, actually, that was actually the third one as well.
Oh, so third. Okay, right.
We're making some progress.
Well,
Right.
and I will say that I think this sets the stage for the next number. So
Sure.
I think your wish will be granted.
I'll just say I happily support Mr. Levchenko's recommendations in every case.
Well, let's talk about just Kapoor very briefly, since we really focused on the policy issue already. This is just the map for Kapoor. This was Aurora. So in this case, you're recommending. It sounds like the committee is recommending deferral pending review of the abutting mains policy as part of the comprehensive update to the water and sewer plan. So with that, we can move on. Is that consistent with what you want to do?
Without objection.
Okay. So the next one is a 9. Let's see. I'm going to bring that up. Okay. Okay, and this is, once again, as Mr. Reamer sort of mentioned, we get these unusual requests that sort of tie us in knots sometimes, and I think this qualifies as one of those. And in fact, this tied the previous council up in a bit of knot a couple of years ago. This request, let me just provide a quick summary of it, involves this property here. It's about a 2.51 acre RE2 zoned outlot located on the west side of Piney Meeting House Road, which is right here. This is Piney Meeting House to the east. The applicant seeking public sewer service for this property to convert the outlot to a building lot for a single family home. The request did originally come to the council back in 2018 and was ultimately denied by the council. The applicant for this lot actually owns the lower lot, which has a house built out on septic. However, this outlot was originally part of a parcel that included these two upper lots, the two upper areas in green. And when before it was subdivided with this main in Piney Meeting House Road, this property was eligible for a single connection, this parcel. And in fact, the front property ultimately, when it was subdivided, the front property connected. So this property is on sewer. The outlot was created as well, but without the opportunity for sewer from that abutting mains connection, because the abutting main is already serving one of the properties is already serving the original parcel to the extent it's serving the front property. So 2 years ago, when the applicant came in, they had suggested, since they're on septic and they're also eligible for an abutting main, they were looking at, could we simply just transfer the abutting main's eligibility from this property to this property? And the council had a long discussion. The planning board had a long discussion about it. I believe the committee was actually split on this issue. And there are, sort of issues both ways with this and how to deal with this. Certainly, if you ultimately do approve sewer for this upper lot, you're very likely to have additional development in an area from an abutting main that was not originally presumed. this area already built out. So you don't have sort of a neutral action occurring where you have two lots of equal development potential and you're just choosing one of the two. In this case, you have one that already built out and you would get a second one. So that's staff's general concern. The other issue, of course, and this gets back to what we've been talking about, the abutting mains policy does not speak to transferring abutting mains eligibility after the fact, if you will, between two contiguous properties. And once again, that's something that could be looked at. This is a very unusual case. And maybe there are circumstances where something like this would be okay. But it's just not something that's accommodated in the current policy. And from staff's perspective, there are concerns that it would create more development potential here than would otherwise be assumed. The planning board, this is the one case where the planning board differed from the executive. The planning board recommended deferral pending review of a concept plan of the outlot to see how it would build out. So they're not as concerned about the transferring of eligibility. They're okay with that, but they were concerned about how it might build out on this back outlot. So that's where we are on this one. The executive is recommending denial. Council staff is recommending denial. The planning board is recommending deferral for the concept plan reason.
I'll jump in and say that I support the planning board's deferral option, especially given the conversation that we just had about picking up the broader topic later this year or early next year.
Now that would be a deferral for a different reason. That would be a deferral pending, the review of the policy.
But deferral based on potential redevelopment. I understand.
Right.
I still support that deferral.
So the planning board says defer, we can see the site plan, but then even if they approve the site plan, then they have to come back and request a connection?
Well, if it's deferred and they see a concept plan that they think is acceptable, then presumably the next time around they would recommend approval, but it would have to be approved by the council. A deferral does have to come back. It's not a conditional approval where if they meet certain conditions, there's an administrative process to change to an approval or to affirm the approval. It would have to come back.
And the underlying policy concern you have, again, you said that.
Well, once again, if you allow transferring of abutting mains eligibility, it could lead to increased development in areas unintended from the abutting mains policy. In this case, you would have an outlot that would not have really any chance of developing, being able to build
when you say
out.
transfer, the Piney Glens farms there, that one, are they not connected?
Yeah, they are on septic, but they abut the main.
So they're saying, we'll give up our right.
Well, that is what they suggested a couple of years ago. They weren't as explicit this time around, but the planning board's deferral also presumes that they are transferring their eligibility from this property to this property. Now, of course, what that means in the long run, it's hard to tell. This property could stay the same for 50 years, in which case there would be no change here, but you would have this build out.
So under that, if that became a policy, then any lot that is eligible, rather than connecting itself, might try to subdivide and then build a new house connected.
Well, you are allowed to subdivide unless there's another policy that would prohibit subdivision in this area on sewer. But you would only be like, if the southern property here were to say, okay, we actually want sewer, they could still subdivide potentially, but they would only get one connection. So if this could divide into two lots, only the one lot could be served by sewer, not the other lot.
Keith, let me add a wrinkle here that
Yeah.
you're not seeing on the map. The lot 2, which is the southern piece here that's shown in tan or orange, is partially within the Piney Branch watershed. And so the Piney Branch restricted access policy does apply here. So if a connection were permitted to the existing house to provide public sewer, they could not re-subdivide lot 2 because of the requirements of the Piney Branch restricted access policy. Lot 1 and Outlot A to the north are just outside the Piney Branch watershed, so we don't have that same restriction. Confused?
So once again, you see what we deal with in Potomac.
Well, I can't help but feel also like this is, people want to change their rights so that they can make a lot of money. It's impolitic for me to say that, but, of course it's true. I'll probably get some angry email now.
Well, and the concern is we don't know. We'd have to look and see how this might play out if we were to allow this elsewhere. Like I said, this is the first case we've ever seen come to the council like this. But that's not to say that if we allowed contiguous properties to switch eligibility, maybe there are a handful or a dozen properties out there. We don't know. And is that a good thing or not? We haven't studied that to determine whether that's a valid concern or not.
But wouldn't a deferral, I'm sorry, Councilmember Reamer.
Go ahead.
Wouldn't a deferral allow us to see what is planned, if anything, on that second lot, that second parcel?
Well, certainly if we defer, I don't know, maybe Mr. Sukup or Ms. Nelson knows, if they can still go through a concept plan process with the Development Review Committee if they don't have, I guess, a clear direction from anyone yet.
But isn't that what the planning board's asked for?
Yeah, the planning board has asked for that.
But not to study the policy, just to see a concept.
They want to see a concept plan for how this property would build out. If the council agreed to that as a deferral, then I guess that's clear direction to the Development Review Committee to look at a concept plan. But if the council were to say, let's look at this in the context of the comprehensive update to the plan, and we're not gonna weigh in on this property yet, then that's not, I don't know what the applicant does with that.
I'm more comfortable with deferring to study the issue itself. If it turns out that this is just a very small scale issue and doesn't really present big challenges, then it probably makes sense,
I mean,
The issue here is that the outlot is not a buildable lot. It's just not it's not a matter of if they build, if they get sewer, they can build it. They didn't create the outlot in a way that they can just turn it into a buildable lot. So they do need to go through subdivision to rearrange the lot lines to make the outlot buildable.
For all of those reasons, I recommend deferral.
But Catherine, are you saying, therefore, you have to do both together? Like you have to study the policy and look at the.
I guess I'm saying that there's a question as to whether or not they can make this into a buildable lot. That is questionable.
There are some significant environmental constraints on the property. Obviously some that do not permit septic use on the outlot. As you can see on the map, there is a small tributary that almost bisects the property, and that puts considerable environmental constraints on the property.
So if we allow, sorry to interrupt you, Alan, but if we allow them to look at a concept plan with the planning board might just say, you know what, this isn't viable. And
That's
so
right.
The issue of a policy change becomes less relevant if there's just no viable option anyway. So we can, what I didn't want to do was say, go ahead and look at a concept plan and then imply that if there is something buildable, that is, we have a, that's going to make a policy. Like the fact that one site might be built doesn't mean that the policy should change. The policy should change on its own merits. So as long as we're clear that we're not biasing what the policy should be, I'm happy to defer to exploring the lot, and it might allow the owner to get a quicker relief if it turns out that there's no good news here. I am skeptical that we're going to get any major policy changes anytime soon. So while we are deferring some things to larger policy discussions, I have no idea if those things are really going to happen in a year or 2 years or 5 years. No one really knows. These things are always they take a lot longer because it's just very complicated. And anyway, so if there is a way forward to at least allow them to assess whether there's even a conversation to have, I'm fine with that, deferring to the planning board, concept plan, while saying it's sort of neither here nor there as far as the policy. And I hope that Alan and your team, you can look at the policy itself. And so if they do want to come back in the end and apply, then we could have an actual discussion based on a better understanding of the policy.
The concept plan review by the Development Review Committee does not require having a service area category that's consistent with what's being proposed.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think
so. It's at their risk to go forward with that if they want any chance of pursuing this any further.
That's fine as long as they understand that, and that getting something manageable out of a policy, out of the concept plan, does not mean the policy is going to change. The policy will change based on what's best for the policy in the county, not necessarily this property, and we will take that up in due course.
Okay, so I'm hearing deferral pending review of it in the policy. The applicant it sounds like Alan is saying that the applicant is free to pursue a concept plan to confirm whether the site is buildable at all. But that would be at their own risk since they don't have a guarantee of being able to move forward.
If my colleagues agree.
Good. Yep. Great.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Next one. We only have 2 left here.
This is like the hardest part about T&E, I've got to say. It's always the hardest part, the work that this committee does.
Well, remember, we are getting the more difficult cases. The easy ones, DEP approves. So they get the easy ones, we get the hard ones.
Sorry.
So the next one is through TRV 10A, Pustinchi. And this one and the next one are cases in Glen Hills. So that just gives you some idea of where these issue areas are, and Glen Hills is certainly one of them. This is a 1 acre property, RE1 zoned, located on Watts Branch Drive in the Glen Hills area, as I mentioned.
Right.
There is the applicant has requested a short main extension and connection from this sewer to the west. However, WSSC has indicated that this is actually not a feasible connection, and that in fact they would need to be served from a much longer extension to the east,
right,
which is shown here.
Hey, Keith.
Yeah.
My guess, I definitely agree with the executive, the planning board, and you. I'm wondering if my colleagues do.
Right. Just to summarize, there are no current policies for this property or the next property that we identified that would permit allowance of service to them.
Right. Yeah, your packet was really comprehensive.
So,
how do you feel?
I generally agree. I mean, I think the applicants deserve us to at least walk through it. But yes, I thought the report itself from staff was pretty decisive.
So I mean, once again, the Glen Hills service policy has very limited, reasons for allowing service, and this one is not part of that. And included as part of that, it would be the peripheral sewer policy, which does not apply in this case either. There was the applicant had raised the consideration that they were adjacent to the sewer envelope, which would have provided them an option for connection. But DEP staff have confirmed that they are not. They're adjacent to sewer, but not to the planned sewer envelope, which is the operating word here, planned. And then the other property, also in the Glen Hills area, for similar reasons, does not also meet any of those conditions. So I don't know how much more detail you want to get into, but yeah, this property here. Let me just show you the map of the last one, just so that we have that. I'll bring that up real quick. That is, let's see. Yeah, this property here along Glen Mill Road. This is the other property in Glen Hills. So neither of them abuts a main. They don't have a public health problem. They don't qualify under the peripheral sewer policy. They're not part of a larger sewer service area that's being investigated to address general problems in the area. And those are generally the reasons why one would be eligible in this area.
Yep. Okay, I think without objection, we're good.
Okay, so we're assuming denial of those two, deferral of those other ones. So I'll work with executive staff to craft language that I think meets the committee's, rationale on those for council review.
Keith, just to confirm, for Anane, we're looking at deferral for the policy issue and allowing the applicants to go forward with the concept plan review on their own?
That's what I heard, yes.
Okay.
And then the Kapoor request was a deferral, and the Aurora's approved. The Kapoor request was a deferral pending review of the abutting mains policy, but we might want to include some language in the Aurora application as well, just to note that. And I believe that's all we have on this list today.
I think that's right. Okay. Thanks everybody for all your hard work on this. Thanks, colleagues. See you tomorrow.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.
Implemented a procedural change for